All right, Immortalites, welcome to another round of the conversations. Today we have the host of the Bowl After Bowl podcast, the AbleKraft, and also I'd say a pioneer in the podcasting 2.0 world. It is Spencer Pearson, or also known as Sir Spencer. Welcome.
Thank you, Kyrin. I appreciate it.
We should have done this ages ago, man. Like we've sort of been, internet friends, I guess, for a while.
Yeah.
Been on the periphery for a bit, and I always like to start off with a bit of a selfish question. So, I've always wondered. So, since I found out about you in Bowl After Bowl, there's, I guess, like if you ever have a moment of daydreaming and do hypotheticals and things like that, which I think you would. Where would you be and what would be different if you had continued the Bowl After Bowl? Because you had about like a 5.5 year break between 2015 and 2020.
Yeah.
How would life be different, do you think, if you'd continued?
Interesting question. No one has ever asked me that. How would life be different? That's a great question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much different it would be. I guess I would probably, hopefully, maybe have like done a few like the web projects that I've been putting off for so long. But it's kind of funny because the hiatus happened for a number of different reasons. The kind of beginning catalyst was the way that the legalization movement kind of rolled out in our state, and we were like at the heart and soul and center of that. And I was trying to get employed by the campaign to legalize medical marijuana in Missouri, and then the campaign kind of decided that my congressional district was just deprioritized, and so they weren't paying like signature gatherers or anybody else. And it was just like a big wind like out of our sails in the activism world. And I was sort of like activism forward with the podcast is kind of supplementary to that back then. And that was kind of how we rolled. We didn't do it regularly. We didn't have a live stream. It was just kind of like whenever we had something to talk about, we'd sit down and record something and put it out. And that kind of was the first in a series of different things that kind of changed my life dramatically. And I stepped back from a lot of different stuff in my life, rethought a lot of things, eventually got a job in Kansas City. So like I moved cities, and just kind of reestablishing and putting together my whole life and job situation over here. That was, that took a while. I was even like a man overboard on No Agenda. Like I didn't listen to No Agenda for like a year. I didn't listen to podcasts at all for a while. So I don't know. My life would probably be different, but it would be like, it might have been more stagnant. That hiatus that we took represented like a kind of a phoenix torch, like total transformation in my own life. So that's a really like deep and many faceted question, like
For sure.
where would I be without that hiatus? I'm not sure, because it would either be that I would have more practice at podcasting and maybe I'd be further along with my website, or maybe I would be stagnant and stuck in that same spot that I was 5 years ago. So it's kind of like, it's hard to tell. I think one of those two,
For sure. It's also it ties up with a couple of different things, because it's almost like you can't imagine yourself doing that sort of thing when you've got so much other stuff going on in your life. It's like, what would have I had to have just like thrown to the side and been like, I'll deal with that,
Yeah.
like looming cancer concerns or something like that. I'll deal with that later. When obviously that would be the wrong move to make. I somewhat think about the same, what if I hadn't found podcasting 2.0 a year ago? Like where would I be and where would mere mortals be? And I think it wouldn't be a good place, because I was, the reason I sort of found the podcasting 2.0 world was because I always had real problems with the advertising model. Like I never was excited by like, oh, maybe I could get advertising one day. It's like, geez, I hope I don't ever end up having to do that. And then finding something which just combines, like the 6 different facets of sort of almost like philosophy and cool things like that. drew me in, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is this is it. This is the way to go. How did you find out about it? Out of interest, I suppose.
I heard Podcasting 2.0 on the No Agenda stream,
Yeah, yeah,
and I think it was like the fourth episode that they played right after No Agenda one day. And so since then, like when I heard episode 4, I went back and re-listened to 1, 2, and 3, and then I've heard everyone since. So
oh man,
it was
lucky you.
super
I had
early
to catch
on.
up on like 33 or
Oh
40
yeah,
episode. I went on a binge for a while.
the old man, Magic 33.
That's it.
Yeah, I think just being plugged into the NA community like pretty deeply as we are, like we heard about it pretty early. So yeah, I mean that reignited my interest in Bitcoin. I had never really I'd used Bitcoin for a long time, but I never really cared about it or had like any kind of motivation to use it. When I got into Bitcoin, it was just like straight up degenerate gambling mainly, and
Yeah.
also like you could order weird fun stuff from Europe with Bitcoin that you couldn't like with dollars or anything else. So I would just like I bought a little bit in I think like the spring of 2014. Like it just amused me because it went down below 420, and I got some at like
Nice.
it's like $395, something like that. I put like I don't know $50 in or something, it was like negligible. And then I just kind of after doing that, I used a lot of faucets because there was faucets back then. There still are, but they're like really spammy and scammy. And back then it was just a little bit less so, and the rewards were bigger, obviously. So that's kind of where I started with Bitcoin. And then Podcasting 2.0, it just gave me a reason to like actually study Bitcoin as money and kind of, I don't know, use it more like an adult, like a grown up.
Yeah.
Instead of just like it was always magic internet money to me before, and I got to learn a little bit about it, but like I really didn't. I was mainly just playing poker with it and betting on sports and elections and stuff like that.
For sure. I don't think I've met anyone who's got it the first time. It's almost like you need a second bite of the cherry or the apple to really get it. Similar for me, like I had some as a hedge, but I was doing all the wrong things. I had it on exchange for like 3 years.
Sure.
Ended up selling it just for just cause. And then when I find out like an actual use case of it, oh whoa, okay, yeah, this is something new. This is really cool.
Yeah, it changes your whole outlook and all your practices and everything.
For sure. So let's get on to maybe the music stuff before we dive into some other things, because I think that's like one of the things that I think you're really doing uniquely. And maybe if you could just give I don't know, like a little 1 minute spiel of what you're sort of working on, and then we can dive into it a little bit deeper.
Sure. Well, I guess the broadest concept, and I appreciate the question because I'm trying to work on this, right? I'm trying to like refine the pitch or whatever it is. The 1 minute thing is always a challenge for me, but the idea is decentralized music, where you can host your own files. You can put all the information that you need about your team and who you're working with into a feed, an RSS feed that's publicly available to anybody that wants to import it. And then you can enter into an ecosystem of similarly decentralized apps, and publish your music independently in a value for value. I don't know. It's not really like another piece of this I think that we're gonna have to work on is writing a value for value license, and just kind of reinforcing what that means and what it is, and like what we're asking for, what's required. I don't know about how much of it's legally enforceable, because that's sort of another kind of point of the value for value thing, is that we're not enforcing anything. We're just asking. Exactly. It's straight up an ask, So anyway, a decentralized value for value method of publishing music. That's what's going on. And how it started was with Stay a While, an album that we just built out with the podcast infrastructure. So instead of a show is a feed, we made an album a feed. And instead of every item in the feed being an episode, every item is a track.
Yeah.
And that's that's the basic overhead bird's eye view of it, I guess.
For sure. So like the cool thing is, you're on both sides of it as well. You're the artist as well as the sort of person trying to create the platform to listen to the music as well. So yeah, like I sort of followed you, I guess. It's one of those weird ones where I was like, why am I listening to this show? Like, I'm not particularly a big music buff, for example. Like, I enjoy music like most people do, but it's not
Sure.
it's not a huge part of my life. I don't hold vinyls or anything like that. And it's not like I don't dedicate time to just sitting down and listening to music, for example. But I was listening to you and Abel Kirby on AbleKraft, and you're talking about like creating this music thing, and I was just like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool, but it's not particularly an interest. But I think it's sort of like podcasting 2.0, where I didn't really know why it was interesting, but like something inside of me was like, oh, this is really cool, and this will I think this will be big someday. Like this will be the like everyone will know about this. So just like having you on is super cool. I keep hearing they mentioned it on the show today on podcasting 2.0, music 2.0. Do you have a better name for it? You've come up with decentralized music. I
Yeah,
like DeMu. That's
I'm really
cool.
pushing DeMu, and I know that there's like different camps that want to go like music 2.0, or I've heard everything 2.0. I think that podcasting 2.0 is fair, right? Because
That makes sense
there
to me. Yeah.
was podcasting 1.0, and now we're in the second iteration of that. I don't think we're in the second iteration of music. I think it's a lot further than that. We have obviously, like, if you wanted to talk about music 1.0, that'd be probably like instruments themselves and then playing them in person.
Yeah, I'd be
then-
thinking more about a style change, for example, or
Exactly.
it's
Yeah, like
some
music-
different way of like ingesting the music. It's almost like you have speakers in your ears or something, so it's almost like the music flows throughout your entire body and you feel vibrations and things like that.
To me, music 2.0 was maybe the invention of the phonograph, and being able to actually record it and listen to it later, and the revolutionary aspect of that. So I think that music 2.0, like, it does dovetail with podcasting 2.0. It's like the right idea. Like, I get where people are going with that. And I've had emails from people too, just being like, because we've talked about trying to come up with sort of something to call it that makes sense. And some people are really pushing, like, just go with music 2.0. It's like, I like it. People are just like, I like it.
Yeah.
And I just think it falls short of explaining what's going on. Is the only reason that I like other things better. And so DeMu, when I first came up with it, it was kind of one of those things where it's like, maybe that's not quite it though. But the longer that I've thought about trying to like come up with something better, the more I keep circling back to it. And there's a couple of problems that I have with it. The main one is its automatic association with like Web3 and DeFi and other kinds of really scammy areas, well. And there's like and I don't really want that association, but even in the Bitcoin space itself, even saying you can stream me sats, you already automatically have that. So there's a certain level of that that's just unavoidable. But I think that maybe with decentralized music, we can kind of revamp what we mean by trying to decentralize. And the whole point is like a lot of these DeFi projects and these other Web3 projects are just like, oh yeah, decentralize on our blockchain, our new blockchain with our new token, and there's a lot of rug pulls and there's a lot of essentially like very, very pretty, nicely graphically designed scams out there.
Yeah.
So that's not what we're into. That's not what we want. We're not asking for anybody's money. We're not asking for anybody's intellectual property. We're not asking to go exclusive with anybody. Our whole message is like, you also can publish your stuff to the world and then ask people to stream you money and get it back instantly on the current infrastructure. So like with Stay a While, right now you can listen to that in Fountain. Right now you can listen to that in CurioCaster, in all of the new podcast apps. You can listen to it and you can boost it and all that good stuff. The problem right now is that all of those apps are built for podcast listening, and it doesn't translate very well at all to a music listening experience. So that's kind of our mission in getting some kind of web apps put together, or mobile apps, or whatever direction that we're going. I think we're going to start with an API to kind of handle all the logic and back end, and then we'll be able to kind of do a lot of different front end in different places, whether it's Android and iPhone apps and maybe a web player and all kinds of different stuff. But I think it starts with that kind of data layer and everything that that entails.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, the way I always look at it is you're not asking for, put this stuff here. It's like, I want your stuff, but I don't care where you put it, which is,
correct.
What's amazing about RSS and podcasting 2.0. I flicked through, I think, it's been 3 different hosts since I found out about it. I went over to RSS.com, or it was Fireside, I think, for a little bit. Then I went to Buzzsprout, and now I'm sort of like doing a little bit of self-hosting, and I've got multiple podcasts, so it doesn't really work for me to be just in one. Like, it's good to have it across different places, which is also super cool about sort of what you're doing. Maybe it might be also worth mentioning why this is relevant. Like, what's wrong with the music industry nowadays? Because you seem a bit more artistic than me. You have a bit more connections to perhaps musicians as well. So what's I guess, like, the problem you're trying to solve as well with what you're creating?
So for me, my music and artistry is pretty casual and mostly live. Like, I know I think it might have been you or somebody boosted and said, where can we hear Spencer's other stuff?
Yeah, I think that was me. Yeah.
And the truth is, like, there's very little I have actually recorded. Most of it's been live that I've ever played. But the problem with a lot of art, and also kind of why I didn't pursue it vigorously or as a career or anything, is because it's so centralized and exploitive. Like, anybody who makes oogles and boogles of money as an artist, anybody that you see walking across the TV getting a Grammy, like, they've had to sign their souls away, and a lot of people are upset with that. And that's been true for a long time. Like, you have to do deals with the devil in order to get record contracts. And what does that all entail? Well, you can get crazy into conspiracy circles. Like, some of that's absolutely happened. I don't think that's like the general case for everybody by any means. But essentially you have to, say somebody else is your master, and you have to work for somebody else, and you have to, in a lot of cases, not own your rights to your intellectual property, like Taylor Swift, not own the rights to choose what you do and where you go, like the Britney Spears conservatorship or whatever it was.
Yep.
There's many famous examples. Kanye West pissing on his Grammys and publishing how big of a joke his contract was on the certain record deal that he signed. All of that stuff, coming out within the past 5 years. People are just now talking about it and making it public, but this exploitive behavior in the music industry has been going on for decades. So what we propose is just having no middlemen, having just a platform where you can say, hey, here's my stuff, it's value for value, and maybe there's never that absolute peak pump where you're just blasted on every radio station, every top 40 station across the country constantly. That's kind of how the music industry's worked for so long. It's like there's these few gatekeepers in between you and that radio play. But everything's getting scattered right now anyway, when it comes to terrestrial radio versus streaming music versus, not a lot of people are even doing shows because of pandemic stuff. There's just so much, I don't know, like the pot's just being stirred and everything's being scattered and castles are being knocked over. And so I think it's a really great time to capitalize on this and say, like, hey, everyone could just work for themselves and kind of like be free, and treat everybody as equals, like as adults with respect when it comes to not only like putting art out there, but also asking for value back for it. Like, I think that value for value and decentralization kind of solve a lot of that.
For sure. Yeah, it's weird when you think about it. So like one of the things that crops up and that I hear is the way artists make a lot of their money for themselves is, you know, selling it physically through merchandise at events, or going on live tours, and you know that sort of more direct with the fans. And you think like, wait, how is that possible, considering, you know, the internet and being able to send just files electronically? Everyone can access it. You know, people in Africa can listen to Britney Spears or Kanye West or whatever. Yet it's almost like there's a stranglehold on that sort of process of being able to make money through that, which I find really weird. Like, how is it that, you know, online commerce managed to somewhat escape that? How is it that you know, blogging, or perhaps, you know, I guess you could say YouTube is doing a similar thing, but at least like there was never a video component, there was never streamers, you know, 20 years ago, because that was just not possible. So
Right.
it's almost like the music industry is well overdue for a that sort of revolution that the internet brought to everyone else, and it skipped out on on that whole industry, which is crazy considering, you know, music's everywhere. But challenge anyone to go a day in their life without listening or without hearing music somewhere in their life. You know, it's almost impossible.
It's wild, but like it just comes back to the music cartel. Like their true power was stronger than the internet, which is crazy. But you know, we had when the internet first got insanely popular, music sharing was one of the first like things that was, you know, when I was on the internet, what I consider it, you know, that was like mid to late 90s. And then things like Napster and Max, I had Maxter because I was on a Mac, you know.
Yep.
And we had LimeWire shortly after that. These different, it wasn't exactly torrent. There was a lot of peer-to-peer stuff, but you know, the music sharing apps where you could just download these files, you search anything and just download it, and then you could throw it on your iPod because it was all MP3s. And all of that changed because they just went to the courts and started making examples out of people and just smashing, you know, getting these huge fines on just regular people.
Yeah,
you know?
I dived into this recently, and I'd somewhat knew about this, but man, the Recording Industry of America Association, they were behaving like
they're
assholes.
so powerful, and they have the top lawyers, and they were able to just go after people and just like pile all this evidence. And like, no, they couldn't get everybody, obviously, but what they did was they just said, nah, we're just gonna make it so that everyone is too scared to do this, and we're going to just keep doing it and keep making examples of people. And eventually, like, the infrastructure wasn't even supported anymore because I think a lot of these the guys that were actually running the servers and serving this content illegally were threatened the hardest, and you know, weren't willing to risk everything, the whole like future of their life, over giving people free music. And at the same time, Apple cut a deal to be able to allow people to just download whatever they want for 99 cents in the Apple iTunes store. And so those lawsuits, coupled with just the ability to, oh, well, you know, why would we risk our life? Why would we risk our ass when we can just get this song for 99 cents?
Yeah.
That kind of ended the Napster era and the LimeWire era. But the problem was it didn't really usher in a big win for artists. It ushered in like it's like okay for the average music consumer, you know? It was like they shrugged and moved on. But the artists being capped at 99 cents no matter what the song is, you know? And I think like some special songs you could do $1.29 or something like. But that was kind of the business model that was set up. It's just like, all right, well, you pay $1, you get the track, you got it forever. It kind of changed the way that albums were listened to for a long time. Like people generally stopped listening to full albums. And it put a ceiling on the value that an artist could receive for any song. That's probably, I think, the most underappreciated aspect of the value for value model, is that it removes the ceiling from your ask. It's not like a Patreon saying, please, please, it's only $5 a month. Can you give me $5 a month, please? It's like, okay. And then you get people to do that. And then that's it. You got $5 from that person for a month. Like, people out there will give you $50 for a day. People will give you $500. People will give, like, it, not many, but enough. If one guy gives you $500, you know, that's 100 people. That's 100 of your Patreon model just knocked out like that. Like, one guy just did it. So the value for value model, the possibilities just are exponentially wider because you don't have a floor and you don't have a ceiling. You can go anywhere.
For sure.
You can be freeloader, which most people will be, you know, a vast majority of your audience. And that's another thing I think that's, I don't know, probably more overlooked by those of us who understand it, just because we've seen the numbers work, you know, and we know that that's all right. But stressing that that's not a bad thing, you know, that like 80% or more of the people that enjoy your stuff will never give you money for it. It's okay. Because maybe those people never give you money for it, but they tell 100 people in a year about it, and like 3 of those people give you money for it.
For sure.
That's still value. That's still the system working, and that's your exposure too. You know, some of these people are your exposure. So I appreciate it. I listened to your last show where you did bull after bull, and you talked about the pass the bull thing. Like, that's value too, and we are trying to kind of emphasize that, like, maybe some value for value is being overlooked in what all people can do to contribute, you know?
Yeah, I think if the idea catches on as well, I was listening to, and I'm seeing this almost everywhere. So I was listening to it was a podcast with Mark Andreessen, who's sort of the Mark Andreessen and Chris Dixon, who are the sort of like founders of the Andreessen Horowitz, who are a big VC firm investing in all things crypto. And he was talking about a very similar thing, which was just like, you know, the advertising model on the internet is really fucked it up. It's like, it screwed it up. And I would love to know, you know, in a theoretical future, let's just say like 20 years from now, where advertising is kind of like you'd still maybe have it for like the really big shows, but it just won't be plastered everywhere. What the average person's mentality would be like in a way. And I think that'd be a bit more giving. So I think like even now, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, that number boosted up from, you know, only 5% of people, I think is what Adam typically says, or 2 or 3%. You know, perhaps that could change to 20%. Like, you know, if wholesale changes, you know, people used to be somewhat okay with slavery, and now it's not. So I don't see why that sort of change can't happen in the mind of the average, you know, person.
There's definitely that work that still needs to be done of just like healing the culture, you know, like just like I said before, treating everybody like as an equal and with respect, and just saying like, hey, this is valuable and I do it for you and I put it out there. And like, you don't have to listen to it, you don't have to like it, you don't have to interact with it in any way. But if you do, and if you like it, then we ask to, you know, return that value in some way. That's all that we really want, you know, and with the caveat that you don't even have to. Like, I love that No Agenda calls them douchebags, you know, like, you can be a douchebag. There's no law against it. Yeah. Like, you suck if you do.
Yeah, but do you want to be one?
Like, for the rest of your life if you do? Now, like, you're not a douchebag if you just started listening, or like, also it's value, so it's subjective. It's like, some people don't have a bunch of money sitting around. Some people don't have a bunch of money to spare. But these are our bowl passers. These are our cheerleaders. These are people who are like, oh yeah, I send it to everybody. I always am talking about it. Like, you can put in time and talent without having any treasure. That's the beauty of the model. And it kind of goes back to Radiohead. When they did In Rainbows in 2007, they released it, and it was like, pay what you want. And everybody was like, you're insane. What are you doing? Yeah. And they made more money off that album than any album they had done before. And the phenomenon is, and no one thinks about it because everybody's crunching numbers, and all of this stuff is run by, you know, accountants and business people. It's not run by artistic types. It's not run by creative types. And you just have price times quantity, and you're just trying to get to this big number at the end, so then you can divide it all, and like everything's a calculation instead of just having kind of a faith and trust in your audience, and out of love just saying like, hey, this is for you. If you like it, do something in return, and like we can have a cool thing going on here. Turns out like people will respond to that, and the guy that gives you 500 covers 100 people to be able to just scoot in there and listen and add to the energy and the consumption without like somebody else paid their ticket, somebody else punched their ticket, really. So I think and wealth is differently distributed amongst us. I think that's a natural thing. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for humanity, that like there are rich people and there are poor people. If there are extremes of that, there's like exploitation and all of that's bad. But like just in and of itself, all else equal, that there are rich, very rich people and there are very poor people is a natural state of life and humanity and economics, But with a value for value model, you can make that be all right. You can allow everybody to contribute according to, whatever they have to bring to the table.
Yeah, for sure. It's almost like thinking about if you're going to a concert or something, and it's like everyone should be able to pay, the same amount, and no one should be able to pay for a friend who perhaps can't get in. And then also, if you're super excited and you love this artist, no, you shouldn't be able to pay for like a backstage access or something like that, VIP. You shouldn't be able to pay more because you love it more. It's like, nah, everyone's got to be equal.
It's just wild to think about. Like Pink Floyd Animals is the one I bring up on AbleKraft. It's like one of my favorite albums. It's changed my life. It's like every time I throw that thing on, like Dogs, that's 17 minutes of just awesome rock. And my dad burnt it for me on a CD when I was in high school, I paid for the vinyl at a used record store. So like I've never given Pink Floyd a dime for listening to like one of the most influential albums of my life.
Yeah.
If it was value for value, like I could have given them money back then. I could give them money tomorrow when I throw it back on and like have this epiphany again and realize like all of these times in my life where like the lyrics have hit me and the notes have like moved me and inspired me. I could send them something else again with value for value, because there's no ceiling, there's no floor, not only on the amount you send, but also on the time. That's like whenever, that's the other beauty about like being a douchebag. It's like, there's no rush. You can get around to it,
For sure. And I see like we're both sort of embodying that. You've got Oscar Mary's Boost hat on. I was debating today whether I should wear the Podcasting 2.0 shirt or
is that the new
Boost
one?
Shirt.
That looks great, man. I love that.
Yeah, I've actually taken some photos in that, and I'm going to change the cover art for the Value for Value podcast wearing it. So show some rep.
Cool.
Let's jump onto the actual app itself, man. What you're creating. So how are you sort of imagining? It's kind of funny because you've been talking about the you don't want music in a podcasting app because it's not suited for it. And yet, I have YouTube Music. I don't use Spotify for music, so I'm not a fan of Spotify.
Sure.
But if you look at the actual player itself compared to a podcast player, it's pretty close. Like it's not. Not that different. So it's not like it's not like it's suited for the format. It's not like it has to be something radically different.
Right. I think in terms of visuals, there's really not much that needs to be changed. What it looks like doesn't change between podcasting much, but the behavior and the logic, that's kind of where it's at. And with podcasts, you've got on the short end like 20-minute podcasts, on the long end maybe like 3 to 5 plus hour podcasts. And so the typical behavior of a podcast is you pick an episode and then you let it play and then it ends. And then you pick another thing, you go down and you pick another thing. And some apps allow you to create playlists too, or like play something next. But with music, I expect to be able to load up an album and play, you know, an hour's worth of music that may be 7, maybe 9, maybe 14 tracks. And I just want them to keep going. Like the album needs to play all these tracks, go to the next track, go to the next track. I need to be able to not only fast forward and rewind, but skip tracks, to skip from track 3 to track 5. If track 4 comes on and I'm like, not track 4 again, right? And I just skip it. That kind of stuff doesn't exist right now in podcasting apps because that's not typically expected. That's not the behavior of your average podcast. So that's kind of what I have been trying to tackle. And the biggest issue I have is I'm brand new in development, you know.
Yeah.
I've got my feet wet, and mostly I've been making, you know, just general web apps, full stack apps that have a database and use data like SQL databases.
And that's for use sort of through like a desktop, right? Those type of ones.
My experience is like web forward, web first apps that still look and perform good on mobile, but like that you would use a mobile browser to use. So going to this mobile first experience, because another thing about music is most people want to do it on their phone in an app. A native app is going to just be smoother across all devices than a web app can be. The weirdness in the mobile world is that because everybody's using different devices, and there's, you know, however many, like 15 versions of the iPhone that are still like in circulation, and the Android devices, there's just a crazy amount of different versions, not only in software, but the devices themselves and the screen sizes. All of these differences across the phones make it tough to write media queries and make everything look perfect at every screen size. With native apps, you can get closer to that because the logic is built in to, you know, have the operating system screen size, and it'll adjust for all the phones. So I'm kind of in this weird place where my experience is in web first. I'm also really green in terms of development. But I've been like wanting this app for so long, right? And talking about it for so long, and just being like, I really want to work on this app with people, you know, like reaching out to the other developers. I'm finding out too, a funny thing about developers in this particular space. Like, if you get somebody who cares about decentralization, and you get somebody who cares about privacy, and you get somebody who cares about value for value and free open source software, and all these different things that start compounding them, these ideas of general like freedom and liberty values, you get people who don't really want to work in a group, and they're like super opinionated, and they have their stack they want to work in, and they have like the methods that they already have. And then when you try to get those people to work with other people, then there's just these clashes of like, well, I'm not using this stack, or this stack is dumb. And it's been frustrating for me trying to like get anything going, because the first thing I wanted to do was just hammer something out myself. And it turns out I'm not really great at like heroing out something. Stephen Bell of Curiocaster, Martin, who does Podfriend, those guys are like, they blow me away, because they have, you know, their apps that they've built, they've done them by themselves, you know? They're like one-man shows. Now they have like a decade or more of experience in development, you know? Whereas I'm like really in my rookie season of actual salaried development work, you know? So that's like a huge gap to overcome. It's like, what am I even doing? I'm like out there like a madman, you know, just trying to get something together. But it's those, it's that kind of like, I haven't seen anything coalesce or form elsewhere. And so it's one of those sick of waiting, running with scissors things where it's like, you know what, I need something. And I'm trying to onboard musicians. And I'm such an optimist, you know, when it comes to these kind of things. I'm always like, oh, anyone can do it because I did it, and I'm kind of an idiot. Right. And everyone else is like, you're an idiot? No, you're like, I don't know. I'm not like some kind of a fucking mad scientist genius or anything, but it is super hard to do all this stuff just if you don't have a background in it. If you haven't been listening to podcasts for years and aren't super familiar and intimate with what an RSS feed is, like I'm talking to musicians and wanting to onboard them, and they're like, "What is an RSS feed? RSS? What does that even mean?"
Yeah, like where's the music live? Like how does
And then I like pull one up, and I'm like, "Oh, it's just this," and then it's just a bunch of fucking XML tags, and they're like, "What?" Like they're like eyes roll back into the back of their head.
That was me probably a year and a half ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's one of those things where it's hard for me to, because I don't feel like some kind of fucking smart guy, right? I'm just a fucking stoner that has a podcast and like does music and puts it, like there's nothing really special about me in my eyes. Like I can't see it, but I do take for granted the how long I've been in this, and how long I've been looking at these things. So like obviously there's a few things that need to happen to make it a little more accessible for people who aren't going to type out code at all, for people who aren't going to manually put tags in, even if they have like a basis, even if they have a starter feed and then just like, all you got to do is add these 2 tags and it's still like, what am I supposed to do? So that's what the app has to do. In addition to being a good music experience and a good listening experience, it's got to onboard artists in some way. Even if it's just at the beginning, like click here, it'll take you to a page, you follow these steps, Stephen Bell actually over the past week wrote a pretty good tutorial for sovereignfeeds.com. If you go to sovereignfeeds.com/tutorials, there's a music feed tutorial. It's just one single link right now, how to create a free Dropbox feed for your music album. And that's the start. That's like what I'm looking for. It really is like what I've been trying to push, is just like, let's start somewhere. Like it doesn't have to be this polished, awesome, kicking ass, like front of the line, looking beautiful like Podfriend or like Fountain does, or like Kirocaster has over this time become. Like, let's just get something ugly that works out there first, and then we can build on it. But then that's been the hardest part of selling my album to people. And by selling I just mean getting people to listen to it.
Yeah.
It's like there's so many steps. You got to get the new podcast app, and then you got to load it up, and then it doesn't really behave like we want it to behave. And then how do I get Bitcoin? You got to load that in there.
Yeah,
if you want to be able
huge
to, and that's the thing I don't even ask people to do. Like I leave that all out, but then it's baked in to where once you get in there, and then once you realize, oh, this is pretty cool what these guys have going on, then they want to, and then they're coming back being like, how do I do the Bitcoin part? How do I get that? And you were pointing out, like, it's easy enough for me to say in the US, like, oh, grab Cash App, load it up, send it over. But like, that's not available in Australia.
Yeah.
Right? That's my understanding.
I released another value for value episode today, and it was these guys called the Secular Foxhole. And there was one cool bit where he went, from step to step on, okay, this is where you go to first. This is how you do this. And it took, like 15 minutes of of him just speaking. And, he was in Sweden. So he had sort of like, he was converting Swedish kronors to Bitcoin using something called, I think it was Swish or something that they have there.
Wow.
Like, man, this is still so early. Like, this is still so hard.
Definitely. It's wicked early. And adoption is early. And that's kind of as much frustration as I get, like having it be this long. Like I always have to kind of step back and check myself and just be like, look, it's all right. Like all of this is coming about because you're in here being frustrated about it. And, because guys like you keep talking about it, because guys like us keep talking about it. Like, not only are we spreading it out, but we're working on the tools to make it easier. We're combining those tools together. And it's really just a matter, like, I could even just give up and walk away from the whole thing tomorrow, and somebody else would come in and pick it all up. There's probably other people out there working on it that I don't even know about, or I don't even have any idea about. And they're just like separately trying to solve this too. So like, it's one of those things where like it may be frustrating, but I just got to keep banging my head against that brick wall until we can chip away at it. And 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, when we turn around and look where we've come, we're gonna be like, oh my god, you remember when we had to write the RSS feed ourselves and like hand code all this crap just to get it to work?
Yeah, when you like the debates between do you hold down the boost button or do you
exactly.
you press it once?
I tapped it and I just lost 1,000 sats. I didn't even get to say anything. What's that? What's that all about?
Yeah, no, there's lots of cool stuff, and I want to get into the mentality stuff in a little bit because I think you've got like some really good points on that. I have like a whole list of questions related to that. What are your sort of like future visions on? Actually, no, before that, when you were mentioning how you use a music app, I was thinking about this the other day, and I just went, recently I've had a couple of experiences. One, I was helping paint some apartments, and that was where I don't want to touch the phone. And so I want something that can just play for 4 hours straight without me even having to touch it. And YouTube Music was great for this because I could find like a playlist for, I think it was Fat Freddy's Drop or something, just some sort of like coolish jazz stuff to put on.
Sure.
Chuck it on and just like paint on the hands. I don't want to be touching my phone until 4 or 5 hours later. And then also a friend of mine was telling me about this a weird what was it? It was like a native Asian guy doing some throat music singing where he was sort of like making these weird sounds like right in his throat.
Yeah.
And he only wanted to play me 10 seconds of it just so I could hear like the like weird stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
And you need the same app for those two radically different use cases, I suppose. And trying to bake that in would be super hard. So like how are you going about finding out where to start first with it? Do you, it sounds like you're talking to artists and whatnot, so
yeah, I the wild thing too is there's a lot of people that like in development what can be frustrating is like you have an idea, and then that idea, in order to be accomplished, needs
like
50 ideas, 50 sub ideas. And those 50 ideas each need maybe 3 or 4 pieces of technology working together to accomplish. And the problem with your 50 sub ideas is when you have your first idea, comes with maybe like a dozen of sub ideas, right? And then you have to discover the other ones till you get to 50. So it's such a long process, and we're so early in the process. Like, we're in literally like the relationship building, getting people to sit down and play nice at the same table portion of that. And the disadvantage I guess I'm at is that the more experienced and professional the dev, the less willing they are to play in this group or play FOSS or all of this kind of stuff. So there's trade-offs there. Really what we want is just to keep refining our ideas and actually trying to come up with what do we need. Because what I also don't want to necessarily do is I do want to just get a bare bones thing up and running and testing in the back, but the thing that we need to put in front of everybody and kind of release generally, like that's fine to do with an alpha where you have some kind of skeleton going, and then like all the crazies who are running with scissors now can also use that, and then they can like say how bad it is and maybe make something better, and all of that kind of stuff can go on. But when we're ready to release something out to the general public, where we can just say, oh yeah, just search this on the App Store and you'll be fine. Like when we get to that point, so much of this needs to have been done, not only with the user interface, making it intuitive so nobody taps on a button and like loses money and doesn't know what happened. But also things that like somebody's going to want to use, something that's not going to like frustrate people and they just like walk away or give up on maybe an app, but maybe a whole way of thinking. Like maybe they give up on value for value altogether just because of a bad experience of an app. Like, So there has to be that middle ground that we find and that balance between everything. And the enemy of that is everybody wanting something done right now, you know? So
Of course,
I
of
don't
course.
know. It's been a struggle for sure. And I've learned, because I'm doing all of this stuff for the first time ever, you know, like, um, a lot of this stuff is, there's just no, there's nothing to build on that you can just like go to another code base to start somewhere, you know? I mean,
And even testing, I guess, because I'm going to do a live episode tomorrow with Juan, sort of just talking about this sort of things, because he's not particularly aware of it, and using this conversation as almost half the material for that as well. But I was just creating the thumbnail, and I was like, oh, I'll just get as many sort of music people who are already doing it as I can. And there's 6 of you, and you're one of them. So there's Able and the Wolf, the Lightning Music Player, Signs of New Growth, obviously with Anthony. There was a guy I hadn't heard of before. I think it was Sam. So Sam Means was doing the Lightning Music Player. Who else am I missing? Probably need to bring that up, actually.
There's a guy, Robert Willie, I know I've been talking to, who's he's put like 4 or 5 albums out.
Yep.
Just kind of like we did.
Yeah, and Dave's son, Talk on 7, I think it is. So that's right, yep. that's like the whole bunch. And so creating it, and
I think they were the first music feed that ever existed.
Yeah.
And then we came along and we were the first ones to like write original material specifically for this. And release an album with this in mind. So like they put up music they already had out, which is like, it's like a hair splitting difference. You know what I mean? Like, really, we're the second, but that makes us the first, you know? If you add this caveat to it.
Yeah, for sure. And you also had like a release date as well. And hype thrown up to
a little build up of the journey to, the journey to getting it all put together. Something that was just brought to my attention today, like a few hours ago, and I haven't, this may even be irresponsible to bring up because I haven't been able to dive in and like try it out, but there's this thing called wavelake.com, WAVLAKE.com, and they are doing kind of a lightning music thing too. So Abel Kirby sent this to me a little while ago, and I want to look into this, and maybe there's something that we can do to collaborate and expand this thing, because I know that a lot of people are thinking in a lot of different directions. And it was funny because I just started going to local Bitcoin meetups, and
nice. I've been doing that for about a year. It's
tight.
It's cool.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Like, and that's what I encourage people in the space to do. Like, it never occurred to me until this guy C-Dubs, who listens to our show, was like, "Oh, I went to a Bitcoin meetup in my area," and I was like, "Damn, I wonder if there's Bitcoin meetups around here." There probably is. I need to look into that. And I went at the very beginning of this year, and I've just been going ever since. Like, is all my people there? And why does this? Why does it when Bitcoiners get together? I don't understand, but maybe I do, like inherently somehow. But it's like, why does all of the stuff I love come up? Why is it all about freedom, and it's about privacy, and it's about decentralization, but it's also about eating clean food. It's also about buying local.
They bring
local beef.
Yeah, they bring grass-fed beef to our one.
Yeah, it's like raising chickens, homesteading. Like, why does this all? What is it about Bitcoin that brings all of this same stuff that like I've felt such like heartstring tugs about in the past? It's like, wow, this is. I don't know. It's so weird and so wild. Like, what communities are being formed by this thing? It's like, it's crazy sauce, man. It's like, maybe we could actually save the world. Maybe we could actually turn civilization around. Like, maybe we don't have to be slaves to this big centralized system. Maybe there's a solution, dude.
This is why I don't talk much about price, if ever, related to it, because it's like it's so irrelevant in many ways. I always with a caveat, like, yes, you need money in life, That
Correct.
you can't completely ignore it and be ideological and just be like, everything is great. But
Yeah.
it's the way it's changed me in many ways. I've become
Yeah.
way more charitable than I used to be.
Totally.
I don't know. I don't know. I probably shouldn't want to find out how much I've boosted away in this last year. Thankfully, I
Yeah.
have a podcast, so I sort of have like in and going out, and it's
Sure. There's a little
and that
balance there.
balances up. But yeah, you're totally right. And I was wondering, like, do you think it's almost like, will the music section be the big, people always talk about the killer app? Will the sort of
Sure.
music be the killer app of podcasting 2.0 in a way? Will that
I
almost dwarf it in completely?
honestly, what I hope, my hope and my suspicion is like we're done with killer apps. Like we're done with one thing
Just
being
one,
the
yeah.
thing. Like that's another thing about decentralization. I think that what's going to happen is there's going to be several weird niches of people who make it work by breaking certain rules and following others, and the other niches are going to be like, rolling their eyes and being like, those idiots over there, and doing their own thing. And then another niche is doing the same thing over here. And I think that everyone can play along separately. I think there's going to be this kind of like spreading out from this central monstrosity of like everybody was on Facebook in 2006 and then like just stayed on forever, or Spotify comes in and like takes it all for a while. Like that used to be Pandora. Before that used to be the Apple iTunes store, like,
Yeah.
I think like, or at least I hope, like, I just hope that's done. Like, that's why I like protocols over apps, because it's like, I think how we're going to do this is going to be the same, but what it looks like is going to be so radically different. And that's also kind of why I go back to DeMu for the decentralized music. Like, what does it mean? It means that I put an album out. How I made that was up to me and the people that made it with me. How we get paid is publicly available on my RSS feed. It's all baked in there. There's the splits. Everyone can see it. And we all decided upon that. And how it gets distributed is up to you. Like, you just use any DeMu app that you like. You use any decentralized music app, and you can find it because I told you where it was, because I host it, because it's my music.
Yeah, almost like how it's
And
listened to. So it's not even like,
exactly.
you have to listen to this all in one go. I think there used to be debates about this, like, no, you need to listen to it like music only on its own. Like, it should be an experience on, you put on your vinyl record or whatever, and you sit in a room and you stay there for an hour and a half and listen to it. But people also want to just do it while driving to alleviate boredom.
Right.
So
Yep.
it's almost like, yeah, you get to choose how you listen to it as well, because like I was saying with the before, where it was like, oh, it was great that I could use YouTube Music for those two different applications. It still took a little while to get to those two. And so if there was one where it was like, long-term music playing, bam, just go into that. And then one which is like, search engine, find this 10-second thing that I want. Those are different enough that I could potentially see, maybe you'd want different apps for those application for those two use cases, I suppose.
Sure. I think that there's going to be a lot of different builders that just build niche stuff. And like, I see it as like, maybe in the last iteration of music before it went fully digital, like when we still had CDs everywhere, and you had like, maybe the most popular one was Walkman, walking around with headphones on. But then, like you're saying, there's a car CD player, but there's also your stereo at home that's got like the 6 CD changer. But then, like, people used to build CD players with suction cups that stuck in the shower, and you could play a CD in the shower. Like,
yeah, that's right.
there's going to be app versions of all of these different weird use cases, I think. And the medium is still going to be the same. The medium, just like then, it was like, you're putting a CD into all of this. You're just going to put an RSS feed with MP3s into all of this. And so I can publish it and have my agreement and it's permissionless. I don't have to ask anybody if I can do it. I just get my people together and I say, hey, you want to be on my song? I'll give you a 20 split if you do keys on this song. And then it's in there forever, and that's your royalty forever. And you don't have to sign any papers with anybody else. You don't have to be signing up for ASCAP or anybody else. Like, it's just you and the people you do it with, and then the people that you put it out to. And like, you don't have to get anybody else involved. There's no gatekeeper, no middleman, no centralized suit that doesn't even care about your music trying to take a cut,
Yeah.
And I think that's the world that we all envision. That's where we want to get to.
I was just thinking of what is it that I suppose why did these monolithic type applications come out? So the Facebooks, Instagrams, and stuff like that. And it was almost like it was now I'm not the biggest on this sort of history of these things, so I could totally be wrong on here, but here's a little hypothesis, which is like it might be it was like the underlying technology or the infrastructure, all of that sort of stuff. They got the machine learning or whatever it is, the algorithms. They were the ones with the code to really make it happen. And the biggest differences like across the world was just no one had access to that, so everyone had to go to those things. But speaking of fun topics at Bitcoin events, I was at this was more a general crypto one, but we had drinks afterwards, and there's two topics came up. One was I'm learning German at the moment, and I was speaking to this German guy, and he was telling me this funny story how he went to a German meetup here in Brisbane, realized why he doesn't go to those because he met too many Germans, and he's like, goddamn Germans, like that's I came to Australia. But I was just thinking, like, the Spotify app, I imagine, is in Germany, just has, it's written in German now. But it's still the same core thing. But he was just talking about how different Germans are compared to Australians. Surely like an app would be able to that would be the biggest difference now. And so it's not access to the underlying like technology or that sort of code. Like the big difference is now Germans are way different than Australians. So there should be an app that's more suited for how they behave, rather than just a one size fits all type of thing. Which
sure.
Yeah, I think that would be cool.
I would love a future like that, honestly. Like the global homogenization that I think most of the superpowers have wanted for, I don't know, since World War II, probably longer. I don't particularly want a world that's like all just the same everywhere, Like I think that our differences are kind of what make us fun and weird and wacky, and also what give us like a lot of different ways to solve unique problems, Like these different perspectives can actually be healthier in the total aggregate.
Yeah. One of my favorite things whilst traveling Latin America was every new country I had to go to, I had to get new currency. I had to get I have a collection of SIM cards from every country I went to, because I couldn't use the same SIM card across each different one. So I'd always have to be like, all right, I'm in Argentina, I'm going to use Claro now. And then I go to Mexico, and it's like, all right, Telcel, I guess, is the best one. So I've got like a collection of them. I should put them on my wall somewhere. Tiny little art piece.
I think that's the greatest, man. Just the diversity in that.
For sure. Let's jump on to like the mentality a little bit. You were talking about hinting at that earlier. And I think you've got a real great mix of, is like you mentioned, sort of lazy stoner, but you're a gun go-getter at the same time. I don't know how that works.
Yeah. I'm not sure either. I don't know.
So have you always had that sort of mentality of just, I guess, like trying out things and testing? And I think you were talking about you were testing like a bunch of different cryptocurrencies, or you were I can't remember what it was. It was something recently where you were just like, all right, I'm just going to try out all of them and see what I like, what works first.
I think I probably was talking about wallets specifically.
Yeah, that's it.
Because that's like, I don't know. I go through these different phases when I get into something, and baby's first phase when you get into something is like trying to get everybody else into that thing you're into. And for Bitcoin, it's way different than it is for like, I don't know, weird band that you get into. You know, like if you're into Defender Banhart in college and then you just like put them on, and then other people like they either get it or they don't get it, and then that's like as far as it goes. With Bitcoin, it's like, wait, no, we can save the world with this, right? So it's like super important. It's like that's why people make weird comparisons like to religions with it, just because it's like once you believe that we can actually pull our asses out of like these dire situations that we're being shoved into with like just by being able to control money and have it be unfuckwithable. It can't be like manipulated by these assholes that manipulate everything else from elections to the, you know, currencies to wars, foreign and domestic, all of these different things.
Rules, regulations, what you can and can't do.
Now you have something that's not only they can't manipulate, but it's also money. Oof, right? So it becomes super important when you first start out to be like, holy shit, like I'm going to tell you why this is so important. And then they start asking you questions and you have to explain it, right? And that is where you get fucked because you have to explain it as just a guy, right? I'm not a computer science major. I'm a college dropout, right? I'm my fucking early 30s, you know? So like I've got a little bit of world experience under my belt, but I'm not like a wizened old Yoda or anything. Like I haven't seen it all, done it all, heard it all, any of that kind of shit, you know? Like I'm no fucking expert. But like I've seen it for myself, right? So like there's this thing, you're trying to convey it, and then somebody else is like, well, but what about this and what about this? And I'm kind of skeptical about everything, and I've been burned too many times, and you're like, yeah, man, that's like why this is perfect, because like you can't get burned again, right?
And they're just thinking like the next one.
Yeah, going through that and just like I had to get to this point because I was trying, like we were on wicked early. We were on in December of 2020, I think, or whatever. I think that's right. That sounds right. I don't know.
Like whenever 2.0
on podcasting 2.0, we spun up a voltage node and got value enabled.
Yeah, it'd be around then. Yeah,
and I don't know. We were like one of the first 100 or so. You know, we were like, we just wanted to. As soon as I saw the vision that Adam and Dave laid out, I was like, yeah, this is where we want to be for like ever. From now till whenever. And like maybe it's hard right now, but whatever, like we'll get into it because we're gonna stay into it, you know. And we wanted to help grow it and help shape it, and you know, the course and everything. Like we wanted to be along for that ride because we just saw the vision of like what it could be, and trying to convince other shows that were like adjacent to us, like our friends, like people we've met in person or people that we talk to all the time online, trying to convince them. I didn't try for that long because it was like, dude, I love you people, you know, like I don't want to fight with you. I don't want to be like, oh, you don't get it. You don't see it. I don't want to be like, I also don't want to feel this guilt of like, oh my God, I didn't save them or whatever, you know? And it's not like I was thinking that way or in those terms, but like, just to simplify it, like, I didn't want to be like, oh, I couldn't think of the golden truth to drop on you to make you change your mind. And that's the thing. Like, you don't change people's minds. It's not something that happens. People make up their own minds. And you can have convincing arguments, but ultimately, even if you have a really convincing argument to change somebody's mind, what you end up doing is getting them to change themselves or see it from another way. And really, you didn't do it at all. They still have to do it. Even if you have the good convincing argument, they still have to accept that argument. So I just stopped. Like I totally stopped hyping it. And I was just like, you know what? It's all right. Like you can just like not do it. And it's okay. Like I'm not going to be mad at you. I'm not going to think you're an idiot. I'm not going to like try to convince you every time I see you. It's not like, I'm not going to bug you about it. I think you should do it. And I'm just going to keep doing it. And that's it. That's as far as it goes. I'm going to try and be an example through what I'm doing. But coming up with arguments and all this shit, like it's like it got too street corner preachy for me. And I was like, that's not who I want to be. You know, there's other people smarter and more qualified than me to do that were already out there doing it. And fuck, half of them end up like leading people astray anyway, you know? So I was like, I'm just going to be an example, and like everybody can come to it on their own terms and their own. And honestly, like some of the people in our circle who I thought would just say fuck it forever, you know, like they were just like, nah, this is totally a scam and I'm never going to do it. Ended up being pioneers themselves, ended up being like Hug Story and John Fletcher. He's like the biggest example of that, where like there was a couple of shows there where I dedicated part of my shows to like countering his concerns and like talking specifically about like
Gotcha. Yeah.
why it's not going to go to zero, or why the government can't shut it down tomorrow, and all these different like countering common FUD stuff. And then I was like, wait. I do not want to get into this business of preaching. I'm just going to like, you know what? Like you do what you need to do, man. And like, I get that you're skeptical because everything's a scam just about if you look into it too much. So like, why would this be the exception? Like you have to find that out yourself anyway. And they ended up being the first people to make a boost bot happen over IRC. And I didn't even think they were going to ever stream sats. You know, I thought they were just like, nah, fuck it. No. And then they got a boost bot go over IRC. It's like it's so crazy. You know, they became the pioneers, like from doubter to pioneer. And it wasn't because I convinced them. It wasn't because Adam Curry convinced them. It's because we just kept doing it and let other people make up their own minds. And it's a whole thing about value for value and decentralization and permissionless anything. It's like, I'm not going to tell you what to do because I don't want anybody telling me what to do. You have to decide that for yourself. And so like, do your own research is like our mantra, you know, it's like what we tell everybody. It's like, we don't give advice, man. Like, I'll tell you what I would do. I'll tell you what I do for myself, like advice I give to myself, but I can't give you advice. You got to figure it out. You know, you got to figure it out like we all figured it out.
Yeah, I think that's why I connect with you so much, man. That it's a very similar mentality I've developed over the years. I remember looking back and trying to get my brother to join the gym, and you know, I would sort of like I was a real asshole at one stage. I think I remember threatening to like not talk to him until he went to like a session with me or something like that, because I knew it. It's one of those ones where it's like, you know, it's gonna be helpful, but like you said, you can't do the convincing.
Yeah,
very very similar mentality, and that's why I like your strategy. It's like, yeah, just do it. Like, I'm passionate about it. I think it's fucking cool. So I'm just gonna do these things, and you know, if you eventually see me in like a couple of years time, and now I can, I don't know, handstand really well, or now like the podcast has got a cool website, and you're like, holy shit, that looks cool. I want to do that. Yeah, that's the way to go.
Totally. I think a trap a lot of people fall into is that they think like they can't move on or take more steps until they like convince this one like special important person in their life. And if you start doing that, you end up driving them further away, and you're not taking your own steps forward. You're also not learning what you need to be learning. You're not moving forward. You need to be learning. Instead, like this person is close to you in your life, right? If you keep going ahead, they're going to come like still talk to you wherever you are. And so you're going to go further and further, and they're going to see you go further and further. And that's more helpful to them in their perspective anyway. Cause they're like, wait, this guy, he was here and now he's way over here. Like, make them come to you and then go further down the road and then make them go further to you. Like, that's kind of that's kind of the mentality I got in, because you could drive yourself crazy trying to convince people of stuff, especially when how am I supposed to convince somebody else when I don't know everything about it?
Yeah. My dad,
it's just like crazy.
My dad believes cryptocurrencies are a scam, and he's, you know, bang on for the most part. Most of them are, but the ones that aren't, holy shit, they're going to change the world. And similar sort of thing. Like, I've got a couple of arguments. I tried, and it's really only when he shows interest now, because we sort of talked about it for a while, but yeah, that's a similar sort of thing. If someone like is looking for advice or asks what I'd do in this situation, hell yeah, like I'll chew your ear off. But
Totally.
until that happens, like, nah.
Right. Yeah, I'm done
Yeah.
flyering and
For sure,
have you
for
heard
sure.
the have you heard the message of our Lord and Savior Satoshi and all that kind of stuff? Like that's not my game, because
Yeah,
it's not like that's not my mindset. It's kind of
agreed.
like a piece of it. What you mentioned earlier about how I don't think of the number anymore. Like I'm not obsessively going over the number, and the reason is you can get lost in that short term mentality of like, what's the number today, or like, what's the number this hour, or what's the number this 5 minutes and the next 5 minutes. And when I look back at when I got in, when it went below 420, and I was like, oh, and I got in, that was one of those Bitcoin is dead cycles. That was like a sideways / downward slip for that whole year that I first got in. Everyone was like, all right, well, something else is going to come along. Litecoin's the new thing. Like all this kind of talk, it crashed down to $300. And then we did it again and it crashed down to $3,000. And now we're in it again where it crashed down to $30,000, and it's like, oh, okay. Like
Yeah.
this is the pattern, right? Like every time it crashes down, we're adding a zero. Like I think it's going to be all right. Like I don't have this kind of like urgency on price. We just went to our first midwife appointment and like totally jokingly, I was just like, because I was paying her for the service and we were like, we like to pay all of the big sum up front for her whole service, right? So I was paying her on Venmo and I was like, so you taking Bitcoin yet? And she just like laughed, which I expected because of course she's not taking Bitcoin yet. And she was like, yeah, one of my sons got really into that. He like sold it all when it was way down. And I was like, ooh, it's like the worst time to sell it all when it's way down. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
what? Can't do that. And it's that mentality of like panic hands seeing their number go down and they're like, wah, wah, wah. They just like, they don't realize we're going to be, we're going to be back past that. They can't think in like 10, 20, 50 year future mentality. And I think that's a lot of like, what we were culturally robbed of is like long-term thinking.
Yeah.
I don't know about your friends, but like I had a lot of friends in college who was, you'd want to say like, "Hey, well, you want to have a family someday, or you want to like," they'd be like, "No, it's future tripping, man. I don't like that. Don't future trip so much around me." They like look down upon that, and I'm like, dude, like, we're not going to be like getting drunk every night and passing out in our own vomit forever, right? Like, right? You don't want to be like, it's kind of, it's sort of fun right now. It's kind of cool right now, sort of. Only really not. If we like actually look at ourselves,
Yeah.
it's really not that cool, but we can make it cool. But for how long? Like, you don't want to be doing this in 10 years? Please tell me you don't want to be doing this shit in 10 years. So,
Sure.
I don't know, man. Like, I had a lot of friends like that.
Yeah.
They just didn't want a future trip.
It's hard. I was talking about this recently. So I celebrated my 30th 4 months ago and 3 months ago. And I was just thinking, like, when I was 20, I had no idea. Like 30 was way too far out to imagine. I really couldn't do that. Now it's like, yeah, you know what? I think I can use a little bit more long-term thinking, and it applies to everything. Same with the podcasting 2.0. It's like, well, even just podcasting. When we started 2.5 years ago, I couldn't look out very far. It's like I couldn't look out, the jump between 6 months and then a year and then a year and a half and then 2 years. Like it's pretty radical when I look at it in those intervals, but in the timing period, it's hard to. I mean, hell, even getting the Value for Value show on its like self-hosting, like I've managed to get I don't even know what I've done. I've got like a server with DigitalOcean. Somehow managed to get the CasterPod sort of software uploaded to it. I don't even know, but it's working now, and I somehow did it.
Awesome.
And like
that's
6
what I
months ago,
do.
that was like impossible.
That's very cool. That's what I want to do. I remember you were talking about that in a boost to me, and you were like, I want to get on your level. And I was like all embarrassed because we're still on Podbean. Like we're not on that level of like self-host at all.
That's hilarious.
The music.
So
music
what actually are you doing?
That's
I have been meaning to ask you that.
Sure. Well, what I wanted to do last night. So the way I like to do stuff is paying a year and then not worrying about it for 12 months at a time.
Gotcha.
And that's what, when we first came back, the first iteration was on Blueberry with WordPress, which was fine. We liked it just fine. And then for whatever reason, like we went with Podbean when we came back, mainly just because it's like the cheapest. It's like one of the cheapest possible options. It's Podbean. And they did a year in advance, and it ended up, I had a promo code also. So it ended up being like super cheap just to do that. It's like the cheapest. I couldn't find a cheaper thing. And then when my year was
coming
up,
out, and you're
well,
like,
yeah, the tags start coming up, and the year was running out, and so I wanted to do Castapod too, but I was having the same problem that Adam and Dave were having at the time, which has been fixed. Like it was fixed months ago, but at the time the import wasn't working, so I couldn't just import my RSS feed and it pulls everything in and like sets you up. And at the time I had like 100 and some odd episodes, and now we're coming up on probably 200 by the end of the year or something like that. And it was just like, I'm not gonna sit down and write out 100 and some odd episodes. It's not happening. No, I can't, that's not even feasible. With copy and paste. Like I'm not doing it. I have to have an import, or tough. Yeah. So that was going to expire, and I didn't have another I didn't have another solution at the time. So I just renewed my Podbean. And probably when that renewal comes up again, I think like, oh God, I want to say like toward the end of the year, maybe early, like February or something like that. I'll probably do that same thing. I'll probably look at getting Castapod going, because I really wanted that to work. That was like a brick wall I was slamming my head into.
Yeah.
So when they were still in alpha, they hadn't. Sure. Yeah, they hadn't released the beta yet, and it was like when Adam and Dave were getting the same experience I was getting. That was kind of like, yeah, there's not anything I'm going to figure out that they haven't tried to figure. You know what I mean? Like, if I can't get it done, then
okay.
If they can't get it, they can't do it. Then
so somehow I've leaped ahead, even though it feels like I was like, damn, Spencer's got this cool thing where he's got like a. Dude. He's like hacking the mainframe. He's got his own host, and then he's somehow like doing this weird, crazy shit on the side, so he can go in and edit his own tags in and whatnot. Which I thought
what I'm doing is just using Podbean like I've always used, and I have a WordPress site separate, which I want to rewrite to my own site. I've wanted it for years. I'm going to do it eventually. When? I don't know. I've stopped talking about it, because maybe if I stop talking about it, I'll start doing it.
Something will happen.
Although I'm talking about it right now, so reset the clock, I guess.
Yeah.
But
at least another year.
I put my episode on Podbean, and then the first time I did this, I asked Dave to redirect what the index sends out for my feed. And I made a subdomain on my website, and that subdomain just hosts my new hand-hacked feed. And all I did was change the top declaration. Like Podbean generates an RSS feed, and it says generated by Podbean. And so, and then I just say hand-hacked by me at the end of that. And I add a value tag at the channel level and person tags at the channel level. And then every item, I'll publish it on Podbean. I'll copy that item out, paste it in Visual Studio Code in this file that I have, and then I'll add in that same two tags, just person and value. Yeah. And I don't do chapters yet, but I intend to sometime. I don't customize my images yet, but I intend to eventually.
That'd be hard.
Yeah, like and what I want to do is just keep regular, like every Tuesday night, obviously, and then also keep getting guests on, because we've had a pretty good every week a guest thing going, and I want to keep that, even though we never promised that. Like the Bulls with Buds episodes have always been sporadically scheduled, and they always will be. Like I'm never going to guarantee there's going to be one every week, but we've been able to deliver that for a while, and I want to like keep that.
Yeah,
that's kind of the goal. That's like the secret goal, even though it's never promised.
Yeah.
And so you sacrifice time when you're doing that stuff. You like sacrifice other stuff you could be doing instead. Like there's an opportunity cost there. So
for sure.
But it's working out, and just one day at a time. And then the live items. So what I do is I keep 2 live items in my feed, and then I just update them in that VS Code file and just save and shoot it up on my FTP server to that spot. And I keep one live item for the regular Tuesday night bowl after bowl show. And then the other one is whatever Bowls with Buds is coming up. So if we haven't announced it yet, it's the ended tag of the last one we did. And then usually on Tuesdays, we'll announce the next one and I'll put the pending tag in there for the new show. And that's pretty much it. Like, I send a pod ping out by hitting this URL that Dave Jones made, where you can just basically hit a URL with your podcast index ID in it, and it marks your feed for immediate update. And that's kind of how I've been doing pod pings.
That.
Yeah, I can send you kind of like what I do for that. And then recently Mitch made that tool with Podverse where you can just like click I'm going live and you paste your feed in there, and it makes a pod ping. I guess there's specific pod ping for going live and ending your live stream, which I've sat down and looked at source and the docs for pod ping a few different times and not really understood them at all. So I know I really try to fight back as much as I can about this like WizKid dev like reputation I somehow have earned, because I have not earned it, and I don't really like, you know what I mean? Like,
Gotcha.
I when I sit down and I look at the docs for most of this shit, my brain turns to the same like mushed pea soup that everybody else's does. You know, like,
nice.
I don't fucking understand a lot of it. When I tried to wrap my head around pod ping, I don't know how to set up a pod ping reader, writer, arithmeticer. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've tried to look at it before and I just don't know. Like, I'll get it eventually because I'm stubborn as shit. But right now I don't know. Eventually, when I rewrite my website, I'll have like a version of what Mitch has, where once I just type in and hit a button on my site that I'm live, then my logic will handle that, you know? But how to do that? Like, could I do that tonight sitting down? No.
It's brilliant. When you explain it, I'm like, I think I can do that. You know, I stop at command line. When I have to start doing command line stuff, it's like, oh, no way. Which I do hope to change in the future, but for the moment, no. But
man, command line they should teach in school. I think like command line and basic like looping and branching logic in any language. I don't give a shit. Like whether it's C or Python or whatever they pick, I don't care. Looping and branching and command line interface. Like, you should just at least have to do that for one semester at primary school. I mean, they have you for 13 years in all of these Western countries for public education, and they don't teach you anything worth a shit, with very few exceptions, you know? Everybody knows what a isosceles triangle is, or like who invented the cotton gin. But nobody knows command line or like basic, like looping and branching is like what we teach people who have never coded before. That's like the first things: variables, looping, and branching.
Yeah.
It's like you can learn all of that in a week in a developer crash course, right? So the public education system's robbing us. It comes back to like what Bitcoiners talk about all the time. Like, this is another thing that I think the more that you look into it and the more that you kind of ponder it, because you're like, what are they, just stupid? Are they incompetent? But like, no, turns out they like don't want you to know this shit. They don't want you to be good, particularly at anything. They don't want you to be brilliant or stand out or change the world. You know, they want you to be very good at like standing in lines and taking orders and paying your taxes and just being a good guy in general. Like, that's kind of what they want you to come out of school with, is like.
Yeah. Well, both my parents were high school teachers, and my dad told me the story once of how he was at some like house party, and this guy was talking with him, and this guy was like a mathematician in some sort of area, and was talking about how there was this like lack of graduates. Like, no one knows these things. Like, it's so commonplace, should be everywhere, and would then go on to talk about like some highly specific like branch of mathematics that, you know, only, I don't know, a couple of thousand people in the world really need to know about.
Sure.
But had these super strong views on like kids should be learning this sort of thing. So I've got, I have some sympathy for the public system, which is just like, you know, everyone has their own opinions, and like, if you really care enough, well, just homeschool your kids, I suppose. Like,
definitely,
that's the way to go.
that's the road I'm taking for sure. But when it comes to looping and branching, like that's in everything. If you look at a menu, that's a loop, and you're in a loop in
Yeah.
computing, and in programming. Like, and I'm not talking about a menu. I'm talking about every menu. I'm talking about if you pull up to an ATM and it's like you have 4 options to choose, you're in a loop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're like on your microwave, like it's ready for you to input instructions, you're in like a loop. So there's like these basic things, like that's what I see as elementary. It's not like highly specialized or like weird corner of the world stuff. I wish they would just give us because we do interact with it in our lives every day. We just don't know like
Yeah.
what's
I suppose
behind this screen that we're
the
looking
underlying
at.
thing. Like I've never even heard of looping and branching before. Like that's not a term I even know.
Yeah, I know. That's what's wild about it. And being like, so what I actually do for a day job is I teach boot camps. So I take people who have maybe had like a little bit of HTML tag experience or maybe no code experience ever in their whole life. And over the course of like 4 months, uh, get them ready to apply for their first job as a web developer,
Yeah.
which is which most experienced devs like hate on and throw shade on, and probably rightly so for certain reasons. Like, I don't know, like everyone expects you come out the other side being some kind of a whiz kid, with and really it's just fast tracking you on all of the absolute basics and also finding like your strengths, what you're good at. So maybe like you take a full stack course and you find, oh wow, JavaScript in particular really clicked with me. Even though I also learned SQL and C# and all these other languages, uh, JavaScript was my jam, and maybe I become a React front end developer. But at least it gives you somewhere to start, right? So that's kind of the challenge for us, is like taking people who don't have any kind of prior knowledge or prior experience or baked in deep held opinions about what sucks and what I'll never use, which is like all developers, everybody who's been doing it long enough has been like hurt. Like they can show you on the doll where they were hurt by JavaScript. And we take people that aren't wrecked yet and we just like explain to them in basic terms. And that's what like the biggest challenge is like simplifying it all and just being like making it super accessible. Just being like, no, you can do this in a lot of different ways. You can solve this problem in 4 or 5 ways. And when it comes to like looping and branching, I don't know, everybody, it's funny because like our generation, everyone says, oh, well, they're so like technically inclined. They're like the little whiz kids. They got their little phones and their gadgets and their eye gizmos.
Yeah.
And
Like they're native to it. They were born up with it, phone in hand.
yeah, the native tech generation, the native internet generation. But are we really that technical as a generation? When we just like immersed in apps, we're like very good users.
Yeah, like pointers, like bing, bing, bing. I know.
Yeah,
I know where to go into
like,
the settings to do this, but I don't know how to write the code to do that.
Yeah, but we don't even know the underlying technology of what we're looking at,
Mm.
And so I think like there's like definitely a reasonable limit of what you can teach everyone as a basic, but I think looping and branching in command line interface, and by command line interface I mean make a folder, change CD into that folder, make another folder, make a file in there, like little simple commands. There are basic stuff, and maybe that becomes something you never use for some of the people in the class, just like trigonometry or just like some other kind of specialized stuff that we learned. But it's like we should learn all these different step ones of everything while we're looking for like what sparks our creativity and like what really gets our brain whirring. And like looping and branching, man, that's the baby's ABCs of it. So
yeah,
I recommend it.
How does your mindset does your I don't know, does your brain almost think in a different way when you do coding compared to like creating a song, for example? Because I find it like when I think of coding, I think engineers and really sort of like mathematical, defined rigidity, somewhat. But it's also like I feel like you can be very creative with code as well. So what goes through your brain when you're using it? Is it a similar feeling to like creating a song, for example?
It's so different depending on who you are and where you're coming from. And there's also like coding for pleasure versus coding for work.
Mm.
And when you're coding for work, you're almost always working in a code base that already exists. And so you're like adding to it or fixing it. Usually you're patching it, or maybe you're adding a feature that they want added. And so you have a little creative juice there. But for the most part, you're like trying to keep things on the rails and just unbreaking stuff when it gets broken and things like that. As far as starting from scratch, I think you could like compare it to writing music, and I also think that like you can compare my abilities in both of them to kind of like, I've done it a few times, but like super stupendously, probably not. Like, is there anything like, I don't have any smash hits on either
Like
side
world
of that.
class. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. I'm kind of like a novice in both of those things and working on it, and building it. So, but yeah, it's way more creative than an outsider would learn. It's almost like writing code and writing a really great book. It's similar, because of word choice and how things are executed. And I don't know. I guess I could rabbit hole on that for a while, but
it's funny, man.
It's just kind of like,
the more I chat with you, the more I'm like, Spencer is just like an artistic version of me in many ways.
Oh, yeah, man.
Yeah, because it's like
ever since you popped on the scene, man, I've felt that kind of kinship.
Yeah,
even though like we're worlds apart, like
it's
this wild like mini niche interests, and
that's it. Never going to be like world class at really anything, but I'll get like pretty good at a bunch of things. And
it's our refusal to specialize that really keeps us like feeling dumb but not looking dumb. You know?
Yeah, almost.
That's
yeah,
why
yeah. So true.
Like I always feel like dumb and inadequate at most things, but it's because like I'm spinning so many plates, and then somebody else looking at me goes, "Whoa, well he does this, but he does this, but he does this," like thinking I'm like top of my class and all those things, which I don't know. I also never want to also be the smartest guy in the room, because I'm trying to learn and get better myself. So like anytime, like on the rare occasion I find myself, it's been like ages, on the rare occasion I find myself like thinking maybe I'm the smartest guy in the room, like I'm changing rooms, I'm like looking for somewhere else to be,
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I just have that hunger to,
and they're just wobbling.
Yeah.
They're wobbling hard.
And I'm like, oh, I could spin this one faster, or I could add another stick with a new plate,
For sure. You're talking about moods as well. So how do you sort of like go about when you're thinking of like, oh, now I want to focus on the music, maybe I want to look at coding more, maybe it's I'll start like interacting with people with Bitcoin or whatever it is. What sort of decision making do you use to say like, now I'm going to focus on this thing, or like I'm sort of feeling like this is the way? Because there's maybe one thing I struggle with, which is like, when's a good time to focus on something else in a way, and be comfortable letting go of something which I had got consistent at, and now it's like, all right, I gotta like step off the gas a little bit.
Sure. Well, I think everybody works differently, but a couple of things that I've started doing very recently, one of them is I got my dry erase calendar boards up on the wall now. And so like I have two of them. They're like a month dry erase board. And so I'll have current month and next month. And when I get to the end of the month, I'll erase that one and do, rewrite it. Like I just put July's up. And I've just been like trying to be more physical with my calendar. Because I'm really bad at like, I got like 4 different calendars. Now I have one for work and it's Outlook. And then I have like Gmail calendars, and I'm just really bad at syncing all of that together. And then I hardly ever enter in a calendar digital like date, you know. There's plenty that I'm added to by other people or in other facets, but I don't really like go into my calendar app and make new event, and because I don't even know which calendar to put it on, you know. I'm like, well, if I was to do that, like, do I do it on my personal one or the work one over here, or which one I'm gonna see? So I put a physical one up on my wall down here, and that for me has just been the ability to just see when I have time to do whatever I need to do, and then just start jamming stuff in. And then I have a third whiteboard that's just a dry erase whiteboard for all the to do kind of stuff. And like one row is just like guests that I want to get eventually on the show. One row is like stuff I need to get done for work in a certain amount of time, and so on and so forth. I got columns for all the different plates that I'm juggling. And so then I'll just periodically come down here, look at my columns, look at the calendars, see where I can jam that stuff in. And for me, I'm really, really bad, and always have been, at self-motivating when it's just me sitting in front of a screen and nobody else is around and I got to get something done. I'm very bad at keeping on task. I want to go a million different directions. I get pulled here, pulled there. Somebody texts me, or like I get a notification and that pulls me away from what I'm trying to do. I'm way better at working in teams and with like people who they motivate me, I motivate them, and we have some kind of project that we're working together on. And so that's what I'm trying to do with my calendar. I'm just like, all right, let's meet with them. Let's meet with them. Let's get somebody else involved. And then that gives me that extra layer of accountability and motivation. Cause like when it's just me, I can kick my shoes off and lay back and it's whatever. But then when I'm with somebody else, like I want to put my best face forward and my best foot forward and kind of turn it up a notch, you know? So I always perform better with like other people involved.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of something I've discovered over time. So that's what I've been trying to do.
That's really cool. It's first of all, you need to have Adam on bowl after bowl. Like I want to hear all of his like crazy Dutch weed stories of being in the Netherlands and stuff like that.
No doubt.
That'd be a great episode. So make that happen.
Okay. We had talked to him a while back, and then that kind of I dropped the ball on communicating. So I'll reach out to him again.
Oh man, yeah, that would be a great episode. I'd love to hear that. But the process you do is very similar in a way to me. Especially like you're saying like you've got 2 months going. I do exactly the same as like the month I'm currently in, and then I'm sort of like, okay, what can I be doing next month? Even though I'm like neglecting a whole bunch of shit I haven't done for this month.
Definitely.
But yeah, I use Evernote, and same thing, like little to-do list on there as well, and it's just it's on my phone and on the home screen. So when I hit that up, it's like to-do list, and then it's like, oh shit, what was I meant to be doing this month? And if I've got an hour or two free, it's like, oh okay, come on. I've been talking about getting a lightning node for fucking like half a year now, and I still haven't done it. So that's definitely one that's just hanging around on there, and it'll get done. It'll get done one day.
It's I think on that too, like it's something that I'm always dog on myself about, is like too many projects, too much stuff on the to do. Like there's so many things. And my website is probably like the biggest sore that sticks out. Like there's so many things that I want to have already accomplished by now. And I kind of like, that was where my mind went when you asked me that very first question of like, what would be different if you kept podcasting for those 5 years that you went off? And I was like, oh my God. And I thought about like, that's where my mind immediately went to. I was like, well, would that translate to 5 years worth of shit done off of this to-do list that's constantly circulating? Like that's where my mind first wanted to go. I was like, wow, what if I had 5 years knocked out of that back burner shit, you know? But that's not how life works, you know? And I love that question you opened with, because it like really forced me to think about like, what are you actually asking, you know? And what's the real consequence of rolling back to that time? And then the difference is like, okay, well, we keep doing the show, but what else changes? Yeah. And yeah, man, I think maybe I don't know, just don't be so, and this is what I'm trying to learn too. It's like, don't be so down on yourself because you have those to-do list items that are still circulating because they're still nagging you. And so they're still there. Those ideas are like still embers inside you, and the fire is still burning, and it's keeping everything running. You know, that's part, like, it's not done yet, but when it is done, and like even when we get a big, like when we released Stay a While and then it was done, there's a little bittersweetness to it because it's like that ember that you were just like, shit, we have to get this done. We got to do it. We got to do this thing. We're still in progress. Then it's outside of you and you're done with it and you set it over here and it's no longer driving you. You know, it's no longer motivating you. So yeah, you do have to get that shit done eventually, but it's also, those are coals in your heart, like fueling you to go forward too. So like, I don't know. I just try not to discount myself on the fact that they're still in there, like waiting to get out, because it's part of literally what's driving and motivating me. So
for sure. Yeah.
It's like that double-edged sword, you know?
Yeah. I a similar thing. When I was in my early 20s, I remember I created this little list of like, I think it was the first time I actually wrote down a bunch of goals of things I wanted to do. And I think I set it 5 years ahead for when I was 26. And when I was 21, I didn't really know what I wanted from life. You know, it was sort of things that I thought maybe other people would want for me in a way.
Sure.
It was like a bunch of stuff like, I should be a millionaire.
Right.
Like I should have, learned how to play the piano or like learned an instrument. Created, be able to speak another language fluently. There was a bunch of sort of stuff related to mostly like goals that were real fixable and that I could that I knew were doable in life. And yet, some of them I look back now and I'm like, yeah, you know what, I can speak Spanish. Like that's pretty cool. But most of them I've maybe like achieved, I don't know, 20-30% of sort of what I thought I would want. But the funny thing is, like, when I look at those, I'm like, oh, what about all the stuff on there that I have achieved and I'm way more proud about, like traveling through Latin America? Like I've got this big map behind me, and it's almost like a constant reminder for me when there was a time where I was scared shitless of leaving Australia, like going to another country, not being able to speak the language. The thought, I don't know how 18-year-olds can do that, because I was 26, 27, and I was scared shitless of doing that. That was just a hugely frightening thing. Similar to I had real social anxiety with like women, for example, and just like overcoming that took years. That took years of like effort and practice. And so it's sort of a similar thing where it's like, how would my life have been different if I'd been podcasting since, I don't know, 2014 or something? It's like, it could have been cool, but man, I reckon I would have neglected a whole bunch of shit, which would have made me a worse person than I am now. Or, yeah, probably. It's hard. Hypotheticals are hard, but
it's really tough because you go back and like, when I like listen to the old episodes, it's like so cringe, you know? And part of it's sound quality, part of it's like, there's just things I didn't know back then that I know now, you know? And I'm like, damn, 15 years from now, I'm going to find some cringe stuff that I'm putting out right now, you know? And I guess that part of it is there would be more markers in the sand, or there'd be more like Dear Diaries that I could go back from those 5 years. But when I think about the hiatus I took and the time in my life, it had to go that way. There's no other way, because there was like such a lot of internal, personal, like struggle and turmoil and things that I had to like shed off of myself, and lessons that I needed to learn, that like, it wouldn't even, I don't know. Like, I think that there wouldn't have been that many shows that were worth it in that time, you know? And maybe it would have taken longer. Like, maybe that 5-year hiatus would have actually stunted my growth at that time. Because when you put out a show, another thing you have to do, it's just kind of a side effect of sitting down and doing it every week, is you have to talk about it and know what you're talking about, or at least feel like you do, you know? Like you put it out, and with if you're a person of sincerity, like you and I are, I believe, um, then you just like lay it all out of like what you're thinking that week, right? And so it makes it tough when you're out, when you are doing those personal growth times to like have something coherent when you have nothing coherent, when you have like no idea who you are or where you're going or what you're doing. And that's who I was for a big portion of that gap. And in fact, when we came back, it was kind of like after a year or two of being solid again and being cool and like having our shit back together. And we were just guests on Hog Story. And we looked at each other at the end of that show and we were like, that was fun. That was easy. We have all the equipment down here. Like, we really should get back into this. Like, it makes no sense to have all this equipment and not be using it every week. So we got back in because we fixed our shit and we were ready again. We fixed our life. We fixed our shit. So I'm really grateful actually for that gap because of what it represents looking back at it. I think that Steve Jobs, one of his he did this famous commencement speech. I can't remember the college because I'm not really fond of colleges anyway. But it was like Stanford or somebody.
Yeah.
But he said, you can't really make sense of it looking forward. It's only looking back where you like can connect the dots and like see, oh yeah, well I came here and I came here and all this happened for a reason. So it's like, I think that's a really important message to those kids at that time. Like when you graduate college or when you're ready to like start the next phase of whatever it is, or there's these coming of life moments where you're like, okay, all that's wrapped up. What's next? And you're like, shit, there's no way of knowing. You just got to go forward like a day at a time, a show at a time. And if you keep at it and you try to improve yourself with each iteration, then looking back, you'll be like, wow, I was just climbing one stair at a time, but like, look at how far we've come.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, like it's glad that you took the time off, and also you had with the way your show runs with Lorian, like you need her to be in a in a good place as well, like the team effort, sort of like me and Juan. Like if I'm not sure, I think we somewhat agreed that if one of us dropped off, the other could just sort of take the show and do with it what they will in a way.
Sure.
But yeah, having that the other person as well, it's like, yeah, it's a team effort as well, so it can't just
totally
run solo. Spencer, man, this is so much fun, dude. Is there anything you want to bring up, anything you want to chat about?
Oh man, I just want to say I appreciate you having me on, and I think this is a long time coming, sitting down and talking for a while, but like it's wild how just in a blink of an eye, 2 hours can go by just talking about stuff that we're really interested in and love,
I know, right?
But no, I guess I'm so bad at self promoting, and we've kind of talked about all our stuff, pull after pull, stay a while, the album.
I'll do it, man. I'll do it for you.
What is it we all say? We'll link it in the show notes.
That's it. Well, yeah. So like the way I found you through was obviously podcasting 2.0. So if any of the things that we've talked about interest you, going to that show is good. And I mean, you'll indirectly hear us on there because we're always boostergramming in.
Right.
But yeah. You have Ball After Ball, which is a podcast. AbleKraft, if you're interested in the sort of music section and what you're working on with that music app. And did we even you're doing like a graphical novel or something like that with some people, is that right? Or
so Abel Kirby does a show that people who are interested in maybe some anime and tech stuff and potato news would like. It's called Rare Encounter, and they do it at rareencounter.net. And it was him and his partner Cold Acid do that show. His podcasting partner, I should say, his co-host. They decided to do a game jam, and I had no experience in this. I had never done anything like this, but I'm the kind of guy that just, when people approach me and say, you want to do this thing that we're doing, I'm like, yeah, I'm in. Like, email me, whatever I got to do. I'll learn whatever. So, I read a bunch of RenPy docs and didn't really understand a lot about RenPy, but it's like a game of or it's like a visual novel engine, how you create visual novels. And I also never played a lot of visual novels. Like I know enough to know what they are, you know, but I never really played a bunch of them. But yeah, Abel Kirby kind of was the ringleader on that with Cold Acid. Those two guys kind of, and we were just kind of creative / like I was going to do a feed because we were going to lightning enable it, but we only had a month to do the whole game. And so it turned into like a crunch time project that we like got done in time. But yeah, visual novel, man. Ended up being called HR Huff and stuff, I want to say, or
I remember the naming episode you did was fucking hilarious.
Like that. It was just like, well, at the last kind of finish stretch, like Cold Acid was like, nah, this isn't really my vision, and so I don't want it to have that same name. And everyone was kind of like, oh, well, let's come up with a new name. Okay, you know, like, I don't know. It was a fun project, though. That's the kind of guy I am, man. Like, people come to me and they're like, hey, we're working on this cool thing. We want you to be a part of it. I'm just always like so like flattered by even being approached that I'm like, yeah, I'll do what I can. You know, I don't know what I can do, but I'll do what I can.
Yeah, and, for sure.
That's part of life's adventure, I guess, man. Just like trying to get in where I fit in is like what I'm trying to do, you know, and where that is exactly, like that's still being defined as we go along. So I don't know. Maybe we talk in 10 years and we're like, oh my God, you remember when hell, maybe I go to completely different, you know, direction in my life. Just like, hey, remember back when I was like, everybody thought I was a programmer and that never really panned out. Like, I don't know. Or maybe it'll be like, hey, remember back before I had any apps and now like, look at this, all these projects
like
I've been on.
Suite of,
it could go either way, you know, and I'm totally fine with that. That's the beauty. It's like, I trust myself enough to know which doors to look through and walk through when they open and not be banging on any in frustration. You know, I'm just trying to kind of like keep my eyes open and keep calm and keep making connections and relationships. And like, I think that Bitcoin in general, when you go back to that as the core, that is TikTok next block. It's going on. Like, it's done. It's out there. It's growing. And so there's not any one person that's going to come along and fix it, make it better, make it awesome. Like, it's its own animal. It's going, you know? So like all of us that are building on top of it or within it or around it, we'll all be fine. We'll all be fine because it's way bigger than any one of us anyway, you know? So I'm just like, I'm just relaxed with the last, that's kind of my new mentality. Like, I'm motivated, but also relaxed. Like, I don't need anything to be done like tomorrow or next week or anything like that, you know?
Yeah, man. I love that spirit. So cool, man, and so much fun chatting with you. And yeah, we'll do it again sometime. When your website gets created, we'll have a
okay.
podcast party.
2025, I'll give you an email. And I'll just be like, look, I know the website's not done yet, but can I come out again?
Yeah. I got some code here. It's looking, something's happening. Awesome,
no,
man.
Thanks a lot, man. It's been great.
Yeah, man. Yeah, my pleasure. And yeah, we'll do it again.